Rob was my boss for about 6 years there, or something like that, 6, 7 years. Let me tell you a little bit of trivia before I go into talking about Rob. Rob's boss, manager, whatever I can say boss, but that was a gentleman by the name of Lee Case. Now, and it's spelled K-A-U-S or something like that. It's not C-A-S-E. Anyway, he was the last commanding officer of the battleship Missouri. Remember, it was taken out of service after World War II and brought back in during the Reagan time. He was the last commanding officer of the battleship Missouri. Another bit of trivia was that ship fired the first cruise missile in the Gulf War of 1990, late 1991. So, and it was, and of course, he would not hesitate to tell you a sea story if you asked him about it. He was a good guy, I guess, Rob. I didn't have much interface with him, but
Great.
yeah, he treated his employees very good. And that leads me into my introduction of Rob. You know, managers have a couple of responsibilities. You know, their employees that work for them, and the bottom line. And like any good manager, Rob was always cognizant, is that correct, about the bottom line. You know, any manager, I respect that. But he also cared about his employees. I felt he wanted to make his employees as happy as possible, as long as it didn't affect the bottom line. And I can understand that. That's it. And he did things. It was a very comfortable work environment. And because I had transitioned from production, manufacturing, engineering, designing, and building products to supporting products. And just talking to somebody else that worked in that area that I knew, and, oh yeah, they hired new guys, got the group going and all that. So he might be looking for someone with your expertise, had a certain expertise that was needed in that group. And so Rob and I talked, and he obviously hired me. He saw something he liked, he hired me. And so I made the transition from manufacturing engineering into the technical support field. Another bit of trivia. Remember Y2K? Well, we were right in the middle of that from a cable TV perspective. You know, at the time, Scientific Atlanta had lunches of products in the field. You know, and Rob's task, he managed the software and firmware upgrades for the products that we felt needed to be upgraded. A fairly monumental task. Now, you know, there was a lot of people flying going around all over the country to make sure that happened. And of course, everybody on the night before, you know, on call and all this people stationed, just holding their breath. But again, Rob was very instrumental in making that happen. That was another chapter. That chapter, I guess, Rob was closed. It was, he works at the Home Depot up there in Florida Ranch. So I see him use them in a different way. I'm just, I'm proud to call him a friend. And, you go from a employee, manager-employee relationship, which is good, but to more of a friend relationship. And so, Rob, if you come forward, let's.
Good morning, good morning.
Good morning.
Is it working? Do I need it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's working. So first of all, thank you very much for having me. Let me first say I've known Reverend Spence since before he was a reverend, so that means a while. I will tell you that you're very fortunate to have him. He's a strong Christian man. That's something I identified with him a very long time ago. One of the values that I share, one of the values that I appreciate, and he always did good work for me, and I'm glad he thought we did a good job together, so thank you for having me. Today, I want to introduce, I brought a couple of folks with me. First of all, my priceless wife, Audrey. 20 years? 21? Surprise. And Kaylee Fleming represents the Alzheimer's Association, and you'll get to talk to her. My responsibility, if you will, in this volunteer association, the Alzheimer's Association, really is to focus primarily on the 9th Congressional District of Georgia, which is Congressman Doug Collins. So one of the things we're trying to do, and I'll talk more about this as we go forward, is we're really trying to influence our legislators to pass laws and pass budgets that help people that are either directly impacted by Alzheimer's or indirectly, that is caregivers. Now again, we're talking about friends today, which I appreciate that, by the way, that was awesome. And we're talking about good leadership today. One of the things you should know about Congressman Collins is he's a solid Christian man too. If you didn't know, he was a chaplain in the armed forces. He was born and raised in Gainesville. And he's a strong advocate for conservative Christian values. So I appreciate being assigned to him and being able to work with him, because he's a good man. And I really do believe he's got our best interests at heart. So with that, let me tell you why I'm here. And the short answer is it was my mother. My mother, her name was Rita. Many people believe that she was a saint on earth. Of course, a lot of us probably feel that way about our mother, but she was born in St. Louis, Missouri, and moved to rural southern Kentucky right before I was born, actually. She raised 8 children, of which I'm the youngest. Spoiled brat that I am. We did lose one. We lost my older brother in a car accident when I was 2, and he was 5. And we'll reflect on that a bit in a moment as well. The last thing I remember about my mother was hand-feeding her breakfast. She was diagnosed with Alzheimer's when she was about 85 years old. And she passed when she was about 87. I'll never forget scrambled eggs and applesauce, because that's the last time I saw her alive. Of course, at the time, she didn't know who I was. If you know anything about this disease, it's tragic in many ways. One of which is she had lost all memory of us. But she knew I was taking care of her that day, and she was very appreciative of it. Like I said, she was diagnosed at 85. She passed at 87. Those last few years were really the worst. Fortunately or unfortunately for me, I lived in Georgia. She was still in Kentucky, which is where I grew up primarily. And one of my older sisters had to bear the brunt of the entire situation as the whole family was going through. Probably the worst thing was the nights that she would be up looking for my older brother who had been killed 30 or 40 years earlier, keeping my father. Just hardly any words to describe what my sister had to be going through when all that stuff was going on. So even from a distance, a few hundred miles away, it was truly a family tragedy. And it moved us in many different ways. So I'll talk a little bit more about how that motivated me to do what I'm doing today, but I wanted to pause and reflect on something from 1 Peter 1, verses 3 through 6, which is, "Praise be to God and Father, our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into inheritance that can never perish, spoil or fade. This inheritance is kept in heaven for you, who through faith are shielded by God's power until the coming of salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time." Here's probably the most important part. "In all this you should greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials." So, again, reflecting on that kind of scripture and thinking about my life and the fact that I was able to retire, I knew I had to do something. So one of the things that you do when you retire is you take stock of your life. Right? And we don't have any children, which again means I'm spoiled to death, so I'm still the baby in the family. But joining the Alzheimer's Association called me and said, really as a volunteer, we think we can make a difference here. And I'll talk about a bit more about that in a minute, but a little bit about the disease itself, and I won't drag this out, but you should understand it. Alzheimer's is the most common form of dementia. 5.4 million people in America have been diagnosed. About 130,000 of them in Georgia. And I will tell you that those numbers are artificially low, because one of the things that's negative about Alzheimer's, it has a bit of a stigma to it, and frankly, people don't like to talk about it. Doctors don't really understand it as well as they should, and they very rarely put it as a formal diagnosis. So 5.4 million in America and 130,000 in Georgia is probably a light number, honestly. It actually kills more people annually than breast cancer and prostate cancer combined. Every 66 seconds, someone is diagnosed. And this is actually going to get worse now that those of us that are baby boomers are kind of hitting that age. That number is going to move to one person being diagnosed every 33 seconds going forward. It is the most expensive disease in our country today. It cost us in 2016 an estimated $236 billion with a B. It's estimated to cost $1.1 trillion by 2050. Okay? So, again, perhaps now you can see, well, I really felt the need to try to get involved. This is a coming tragedy. I mean, it's a perfect tragedy for a lot of people today, but it's only going to get worse. And the only way I could feel like I could really make a difference was to try to get ahead of it. And to try to get ahead of it means to try to influence our legislators, both at the federal and the state level, to try to make a difference here. Again, pass budgets, pass laws, legislations, all those kinds of stuff. So I will talk about that more in a minute as well. I want to read from Psalm 55. "Cast thy burden upon the Lord, and he shall sustain thee." All right, so the next thing I wanted to talk about was the Alzheimer's Association itself. It operates across the country. I honestly don't know how many people are involved. I've only been involved since last fall, and it's a huge organization. They staff a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day a week, 365-day days per year inbound call center for people that are affected. They host a number of caregiver events throughout the state of Georgia as well as across the country. They have a sister organization called the Alzheimer's Impact Movement, which is also geared to try to make a difference. At the federal level, it's really our political action committee side of it. Again, this conversation is not about politics, but at the same time, if you really want to try to make a difference and get ahead of a disease like this, it has to be done at the federal level. Just to give you an idea, the National Institute of Health has a Alzheimer's plan, and they would like to find a cure or a way to slow the disease by 2025, because they're a very simple pay me now, pay me later type of equation. We can either continue to spend this $236 billion going on $1.1 trillion to try to catch up with the disease, or we can spend this $400 million that we're asking for on an annual basis and try to get ahead. And obviously, the old saying is, pound of prevention is, an ounce of prevention worth a pound of cure. So I'm really big advocate of trying to get ahead of it at this point. So with that, I think I'll just wrap it. I did have one other prayer, but it looks like I lost that piece of paper in my pile here. But know that if you're suffering with the disease, this is probably the most important thing that I believe to you today. If you're suffering, or you know somebody who's suffering, family, friend, or whatever, reach out. Okay? There are hundreds of people, both volunteers and staff people, all over the country, and actually across the globe, because we're connected with the International Alzheimer Association, working on your behalf. Again, you, your family member, or somebody who's just a friend. There's hundreds and hundreds of people working on your behalf across the globe. Reach out, call this 800 number if you need to, ask us questions. I've got business cards, we've got pamphlets and information in the back to try to give you an idea of the types of services that are available to you, or a friend, or a loved one, or a family member. The second thing I would say is if you want to volunteer to help, there's always opportunities to help, right? I'm looking to add people to my small team to try to, again, work on these legislators at both the state and the local level. So if you feel a burning desire to